Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
You think living rent-free is some kind of blessing? Try waking up every morning in a house where your presence is tolerated, not welcomed, and every little thing you do, every dish left in the sink, every sigh that sounds too tired, is interpreted like you're some freeloading burden who never made it out of childhood. My mom has a way of saying things that sounds polite if you don't really listen. If you do listen, though, you start to feel them settle under your skin, deep, like splinters that fester over time. It was a Sunday dinner, like most Sundays, except this time Paul brought that smug fiancée of his Emily, or Emma, or something with a fake laugh that didn't stop. Mom was dressed like she always is for these dinners, like she expected the mayor to show up, not her own daughter who works closing shifts at Target and sleeps in what used to be a laundry room. She hovered around Paul and his girl, taking photos of the roast chicken like it was art, smiling too wide, too bright. And I was there, sitting on the corner stool with a paper napkin in my lap, trying not to make it worse by existing too loudly. Paul was bragging about his new condo again. "You should see the kitchen," he said, like he invented granite countertops. Open concept, double fridge. Even has one of those garbage disposals that doesn't jam. Emily giggled like he'd just said something brilliant. Mom beamed, eyes twinkling. "That's what happens when you work hard and pay your way, sweetheart. Unlike some people." And there it was. I didn't even flinch. Not on the outside. I just kept chewing the mashed potatoes that I'd made, that she'd taken credit for when the cousins arrived. I didn't say a word because that's the rule. You don't talk back when she's like this. You nod, you smile, you become wallpaper. But inside? Inside I was boiling over. Because she said it before in different ways. "You're lucky we let you stay here rent-free," she said later when Paul and his girl had gone home, and she was sipping her boxed wine like it was Bordeaux. "At least someone's benefiting from this house other than the bank." I looked at her across the kitchen. Her robe was half open, her mascara smudged from the wine, and yet she still had that sneer of superiority like she was a queen and I was the servant who overstayed her welcome. She always made it sound like I had failed. Like I didn't want to move out, like I didn't try. Never mind that I had been working 2 jobs just to cover basic bills while trying to finish a certification course at night school. Never mind that my ex had left me with half his credit card debt and all of his bullshit. Never mind that she had invited me back after the breakup, saying, "It's just temporary, honey. Take the time you need." That was 2 years ago, and I've been paying in shame ever since. That night, I lay on the cot in my makeshift room, staring at the popcorn ceiling. I could hear the pipes creaking as she ran her bath upstairs. The sound of running water felt mocking somehow. I reached for my phone, opened the calculator app, and started plugging in numbers, my monthly income, my expenses, what I might be able to put aside if I stopped paying for little luxuries like coffee and Uber rides when I got off late. I went from the calculator to Google. I typed, "Can you pay someone else's mortgage?" And then, "How to make anonymous mortgage payments." I don't know what pushed me to look it up. Maybe it was spite. Maybe it was pride, the kind that festers when someone treats you like you've never done a damn thing in your life. Or maybe it was the realization that no matter what I said, she'd never believe I could contribute. So I was going to show her in the one way she couldn't deny. Turns out, it's not that hard. The mortgage company didn't care who paid. As long as the amount came through on time, they didn't ask questions. I found the bank listed in one of the piles of unopened mail by the door, the ones she never bothered to check unless they were from Macy's or a holiday card she could show off. I took a photo of the account number on the statement when she wasn't looking. Set up a wire. Not much, just enough to get the ball rolling. $250. More than I could afford, really. But the moment I hit submit, something inside me clicked. It wasn't about proving her wrong. Not really. It was about reclaiming my damn dignity. If she was going to act like I owed her for every breath of air in that house, then fine, I'd pay. But not to her. To the bank. To the place that actually owned the roof over our heads. because at least they didn't try to break me down every time I poured a bowl of cereal. The next morning, she handed me a grocery list. If you're going to eat here, you can at least pick up some milk. I looked at her, looked at the note, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. I smiled, folded the list, and tucked it in my pocket. I was done playing the role of the ungrateful daughter. I wasn't going to beg for a place to stay anymore. I had just bought a piece of that roof. And someday, she'd find out, maybe even regret those words. But not yet. Not today. Let her keep thinking she holds the cards. I was building my hand, one payment at a time. I didn't sleep the night after I sent that first payment, just laid there in my little room that still had old detergent stains in the corners and a plug-in air freshener to cover the smell of damp walls, staring up at the ceiling like it was about to fall in. I kept refreshing the banking app on my cracked phone screen like I was waiting for the universe to either collapse or reward me. When the transaction finally changed from pending to processed, something strange settled in my chest. It wasn't joy, not exactly. It was heavier than that. Like I'd finally picked up the first brick of a house I'd have to build alone, in silence, under someone else's roof. The thing no one tells you is that when you start secretly paying a mortgage that isn't technically yours, the world doesn't slow down to congratulate you. There's no parade, no moment of clarity. There's just another day, another dirty dish in the sink that no one washed, another passive-aggressive note on the fridge about replacing the orange juice. My mom was in the kitchen when I walked out that morning, tapping on her iPad with her glasses sliding down her nose and a half-drunk mug of coffee sweating on the table. "Don't forget to take the trash out before you leave," she said without looking up, like I was a damn housekeeper she didn't pay. I just nodded, slid on my shoes, and walked out the door with the tightest smile I could manage. If she only knew what I'd just done. If she only knew that the same roof she was using as leverage against me was now partially mine, in a way she hadn't seen coming. But she didn't know. And I sure as hell wasn't going to be the one to tell her yet. Getting the mortgage details was easier than I thought it would be, mostly because banks don't care who you are as long as you've got the numbers right. All I needed was the loan account from that statement she left on the counter one afternoon when she was too busy yelling at the dog for tracking in dirt. I memorized the bank's name and the customer service number like it was a secret code. When I called, the woman on the line sounded bored, probably on her third hour of dealing with overdrafts and late fees. "Are you an authorized party on the loan?" she asked me, monotone. "No," I said, and braced for the hang-up. But she didn't. She paused, clicked a few keys. "Are you making a payment today?" "Yes," I said, and that was it. She gave me the routing info. No ID check, no security question. Just a long pause and a transaction total. The minimum due is $764. You can send any amount over that, and it'll go to the principal. I remember blinking at the number. 764. That was more than half my paycheck from the pharmacy, before taxes. Still, I sent $250, which felt like hacking off a limb, but I did it. Because it was worth it just to know I wasn't living in her house on her terms anymore. Of course, I made a mistake during all this, one I still don't know how I screwed up so badly. I thought the mortgage interest was around 25% per month, or maybe it was 25 annually. I'm not really sure. Either way, it sounded like robbery when I looked at the total owed. I told my coworker about it, and she laughed so hard she had to lean against the medicine shelves. 25% monthly? What are they, loan sharks, she said, wiping her eyes. But I didn't laugh with her. I didn't find anything funny about bleeding money into a house you don't even own yet. Keeping the payments going without anyone noticing meant getting creative. I picked up more shifts at the pharmacy and started taking weekend hours at a diner down the road, the kind of place where old men leave $2 tips and argue about the price of bacon. I worked until my legs hurt and my back ached, and still, I smiled and poured coffee like it was the only thing keeping me alive. All because I knew that one day, when it all came out, I'd have something real to show for it. The first time I saw the payment reflected on the online mortgage portal, I had to make a fake email and a dummy login just to check. I almost cried. It was small, barely a dent in the ocean of debt, but it was mine. And I didn't need her permission, her blessing, or her damn approval. She walked past me that morning, her hair wrapped in a towel, humming some old country song like nothing had changed. I stood at the sink, rinsing out a coffee mug she never washed, and when she looked at me sideways and said, "Did you pick up that almond milk I like?" I just smiled. "Sure did," I said, even though I'd nearly overdrafted my account doing it. Because the truth was, I was done fighting with her in the open. I'd found a new way to win, and it was quiet, methodical, and steady. Like water wearing down stone. She thought she still had the upper hand. Let her think that for now. Let her think I was still the lazy daughter, leeching off her generosity. Because the next payment was already scheduled. And I had no intention of stopping. It was a Saturday afternoon when Paul decided to make one of his grand appearances, the kind of day where you just want to lie still with a fan in your face and pretend the world doesn't exist beyond the window. I had worked a double shift at the diner the night before, came home smelling like fried onions in desperation, then caught a few hours of sleep before heading out to the pharmacy for another 8 hours of customers asking where the aspirin aisle was. So when I came home, hoping for nothing more than a long shower and a microwaved burrito, I found Paul's shiny little BMW parked in the driveway like a trophy someone forgot to dust. Inside, the air smelled like pot roast and perfume. My mom had her guest apron on, which was different from her regular apron in that it was newer, cleaner, and mostly for show. Paul was in the kitchen with that over-gelled hair of his, wearing a smug little grin like someone who'd just gotten a raise for doing nothing more than existing in the right place at the right time. Emily, or Emma, I still hadn't bothered to remember which, was perched on the stool like some decorative bird, giggling at a story he'd probably already told twice. The moment I walked in, everything went stiff for just a second, like they'd been talking about me and suddenly realized I'd arrived. My mom broke the silence first with that shrill, overcompensating tone she uses when she wants to pretend everything's fine. "There she is," she said, like I was some stray cat finally home for dinner. "Long day at work? You should really take care of yourself, honey." I ignored her and went straight for the fridge, hoping they'd just go back to their conversation, but Paul wasn't about to let that happen. He leaned against the counter, sipping from a beer that I knew damn well I bought last week. "So," he said, dragging the word out like a lazy punchline, "Mom tells me you're still working both jobs. That's dedication. Or desperation, depending on how you look at it." Emily gave another one of her sugar-soaked laughs, like he was charming instead of being a condescending prick. I didn't respond. I just stared at the fridge door like it might offer me a portal to anywhere else. But my mom wasn't done twisting the knife. "You know, Paul could have bought a house by now," she said, glancing at him like he was the second coming of Warren Buffett. "But he's being smart, saving, investing. Not just throwing money at things without a plan." That line almost made me choke. If only she knew what I'd been throwing money at for the last few months, her roof, her walls, her precious sense of superiority. But I didn't take the bait. I just nodded, said nothing, and left them to their performance. The next week, things started slipping. I was so damn tired all the time that I missed a shift at the pharmacy, just flat out forgot to show up. My boss, a woman named Carla who wore fake nails like claws and smelled like cherry lip gloss, pulled me into the back room and gave me that concerned, but corporate speech. "I like you," she said, tapping her pen on a clipboard. "But if this keeps up, I'll have to reduce your hours. We need people we can count on." I apologized, took the warning, and walked home in the kind of heat that makes your bones sweat. That night, I collapsed on my bed, shoes still on, and passed out for 5 hours. When I woke up, there was a voicemail on my phone. It was from the bank. "Hi, this message is for my name. We're calling to confirm some ownership record updates on the mortgage associated with your file. Please give us a call back at your earliest convenience." I played it twice, then a third time, like maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something less terrifying. Ownership record updates. My stomach turned. I had been so careful, so cautious. I paid online, under my name, but never linked it to her address. I thought I was invisible in their system. Clearly, I wasn't. My hands shook as I deleted the voicemail, heart pounding like a drum in my throat. I knew it was only a matter of time before something like this happened. These things have a way of surfacing when you least expect them. And if the bank was calling me now, how long before they called her? Or worse, before she picked up one of those letters she always let pile up unopened? I sat in the silence of that tiny room with the hum of the fridge in the background, my pulse tapping a fast rhythm against my ribs. My carefully built secret was starting to crack, and the problem with cracks is they don't stay small for long. Once they start, they spread quietly, slowly, then all at once. I thought I could keep this up forever, just keep paying and staying quiet, and waiting for the day I could throw it all in her face. But now the mirror I'd been hiding behind was beginning to splinter. And Paul, that smug bastard, was sniffing around more than usual, asking questions, watching too closely. Something was shifting, and I didn't know if I could fix it fast enough. Because now it wasn't just about paying the mortgage. Now I had to protect the truth. The morning of the barbecue started like most summer Saturdays in our neighborhood, too bright, too hot, and with the unmistakable sound of folding chairs screeching against the driveway. I had been up since 7, prepping macaroni salad and slicing onions, doing the grunt work as usual while Mom barked orders like a general preparing for a state visit. She always turned these family events into full-blown performances, like her life needed an audience in order to make sense. This wasn't just a backyard gathering, it was a carefully curated social parade where she could showcase her well-trained son, her future daughter-in-law, and whatever version of me she thought would get the least pity from the guests. By 10, the folding tables were covered in plastic cloths. The citronella candles were lit even though no one remembered them after sunset, and the grill was smoking like a dying car engine. Mom fluttered from guest to guest like some deranged hummingbird, complimenting outfits and retelling Paul's career highlights, as if she were his personal PR manager. "Can you believe it?" she kept saying. "Paul just got a raise. Again. That boy's going places. Real estate this time. He's got a mind for numbers." I stood near the cooler, arms crossed, half hoping for rain that wasn't coming. My shirt was already sticking to my back, and I had that kind of pounding, low-grade headache that comes from clenching your jaw too long. Paul was standing near the grill with a spatula in one hand and a craft beer in the other, looking like a commercial for smug male competence. Emily, still unreasonably enthusiastic, fluttered beside him in a sundress that probably cost more than my monthly car insurance. The cousins started showing up around noon: Ronnie, who always brought weed but never enough to share, and Melissa, who had a new boyfriend every time and was now apparently dating a guy named Hunter with a man bun and no personality. Even the neighbors wandered over from their yards, drawn in by the smell of grilled meat and the promise of gossip. Someone turned on music, old country, of course, and someone else popped open the boxed wine. It was all so painfully predictable, like a scene from a TV show that had run for too many seasons. I was halfway through my second soda, pretending to be interested in a conversation about home remodeling, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it, but something told me to check, and when I did, I saw it was the bank. My stomach did a slow turn. I stepped away from the crowd, ducked behind the garage, and picked up. "Hi, this is Sarah from First Metro Bank," said the voice on the other end. "We're just calling to confirm your mailing address as the primary mortgage owner of 128 Maple Street." The world didn't stop moving when she said it. People didn't fall silent in the background. There were still laughs, still clinks of beer bottles, still the smell of hot dogs burning slightly on the grill. But in my head, everything froze. That phrase, primary mortgage owner, rang through me like a fire alarm. I stepped back out, still holding the phone to my ear, just as Paul called out, "Hey sis, grab some plates, would you?" I didn't answer him. I just walked to the center of the yard, feeling heat rise up my neck, not from the sun, but from something more raw, more final. Everyone was looking at me now, either because I was ignoring Paul or because they sensed something off. And that's when I made the mistake of not lowering my voice. Yes, I said clearly into the phone, loud enough for it to carry. That's still the right address. Thanks. The words hung there in the air like smoke from a bad engine. My mom, who had been mid-sentence with Mrs. Donnelly from next door, turned her head so sharply I thought her neck might snap. "Who was that?" she asked, her voice still sweet but dipped in suspicion. I didn't hesitate. "The bank," I said. "They just called to confirm some updates on the house loan." Paul squinted, stepping closer. "Wait, what do you mean? Why are they calling you?" The backyard went quiet like a record scratch in a bad sitcom. A cousin dropped a paper plate. Even Emily stopped pretending to smile. "They call me now," I said, taking a long sip from my soda. "Because I've been paying it. For a while now." You could almost hear the synapses firing in people's brains as they tried to make sense of what I'd said. My mom looked like someone had slapped her in the face with a raw fish. Her mouth opened, then shut, then opened again, but no words came out. Paul took a step forward like he was about to argue, but even he couldn't string a sentence together fast enough. One of the younger cousins whispered to another, "Wait, what did she just say?" I didn't repeat it. I didn't need to. The silence did all the talking for me. And still, she just stood there. My mother. This woman who had made it her mission to remind everyone that I lived under her roof rent-free. She looked pale now, actually pale, like her skin had forgotten how to hold color. She clutched the edge of the table like it might collapse under her weight. "Why?" she finally said, but the word came out as more of a wheeze than a question. I just looked at her, calm as anything, like I hadn't just dropped a grenade in the middle of her carefully constructed kingdom. "Because I got tired of waiting for you to believe I could." Then I walked over to the cooler, popped open another soda, and leaned against the fence like the scene around me wasn't slowly imploding. Because I'd already played my card. And now I was just watching the fallout. What none of them knew was that this wasn't the end of the story. Not even close. The morning after the barbecue, the house felt colder than I'd ever known it to be, not just in temperature, but in the silence that had crawled its way into the walls like mold. No TV humming in the background, no clatter of pans in the kitchen, no wine-soaked monologue from my mother about how everyone in the family secretly envies her ability to host. Just quiet, thick and awkward, the kind of quiet that feels personal. The air itself seemed to shrink, like even the house was embarrassed. I woke up late on purpose, hoping to avoid the inevitable tension hanging in the air like smog. When I stepped out into the hallway, the sunlight through the blinds felt artificial, like it was trying too hard to pretend nothing had changed. But everything had. The party may have ended hours ago, but the impact of that one moment, of that one sentence, was still reverberating like a dropped plate spinning on the floor. My mom didn't say a word that day. Not to me, not even to the neighbor when she stopped by to return a folding chair and make sure she hadn't missed some juicy follow-up. She just nodded, closed the door, and sat in that same corner of the living room where she'd posted up for years like a queen on a throne built from old grievances and expired authority. Even Paul, who usually had no problem staying for days to soak in the praise and admiration, left early the next morning with a tense "we'll talk later" and a stiff hug that smelled like confusion and failed control. I stayed quiet too, not out of guilt, but because I had said all I needed to say, for the moment, anyway. But by the third day, I couldn't take the silence anymore. It wasn't peaceful. It was accusatory. It was weaponized. And I wasn't going to keep living under it like it was some kind of unspoken punishment for speaking the truth. So I waited until late evening, when the shadows started stretching across the walls and the house always felt a little too big for just the two of us. She was sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine she wasn't reading, her glasses perched at the edge of her nose like they always were when she was pretending to be busy. "I need to say something," I said from the doorway. voice calm but deliberate. She didn't look up right away, but I knew she was listening, so I kept going. You didn't want a daughter. You wanted a tenant. Someone who wouldn't talk back, someone who owed you for every piece of toast and hot shower. Her hand stilled on the page. Still, no eye contact. I've spent the last few years shrinking myself so you could pretend everything was normal. I let you make your little digs and pass them off as jokes. I let Paul look down at me like I was a failed experiment just because he's got a mortgage and a fiancé and a goddamn grill. She finally looked up at me then, and there was something in her face I hadn't seen in a long time. Not anger, not even disappointment, but fear. The kind of fear that comes when the story you've told yourself for years stops making sense. I walked over and pulled the envelope from my bag. Plain white, no markings, nothing dramatic. I handed it to her like it was just another piece of junk mail. She took it with hesitant fingers, slowly peeled it open, and unfolded the documents inside. Her eyes scanned the page. Deed transfer. Name update. Legal signatures. Everything done through the right channels. My name, in black ink, where hers used to be. I've been making the payments for months, I said quietly, watching her face go from pale to something more complex, something like grief mixed with pride and a big dose of disbelief. And last week, I finalized the transfer. The house is mine now. Legally. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time in years I think she saw me, not just as a disappointment in a bathrobe, not as the daughter who never quite measured up to Paul, but as someone she couldn't control anymore. Someone she couldn't use as a mirror to reflect her own insecurities. You told me I was lucky to stay here rent-free, I said, my voice sharper now, like a blade being drawn. Now you can stay rent-free. Because I'm not you. I won't hold it over your head every time you breathe. I didn't wait for her to respond. I didn't want her apology. I didn't need her tears. I turned around, walked back to my room, zipped my duffel bag closed, and slung it over my shoulder. One change of clothes, my laptop, my phone charger. That was all I needed. The rest could rot in that house, buried under years of resentment and unspoken truths. As I walked out the front door, I paused on the porch for just a second, letting the night air hit my face like a baptism. The street was quiet. A sprinkler hissed from 2 lawns over. Somewhere, a dog barked at nothing. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a new apartment or a friend's couch lined up. All I had was a beat-up car, a bank account running on fumes, and a sudden, terrifying sense of freedom. I drove until I found a coffee shop that stayed open late. One of those places with too many Edison bulbs and indie music playing at a volume that pretended not to be intrusive. I sat near the window, sipping a too-hot cup of coffee, watching the street outside as the last remnants of sunlight disappeared. Then a car pulled up across the street. Paul got out. I watched as he walked up the steps to the house, slow and deliberate, like he was walking into a battlefield instead of his childhood home. I didn't know if he was coming to defend her or to finally ask questions. I didn't know if he knew what was in the envelope. Maybe he did. Maybe she called him the moment I left. Or maybe he was just as in the dark as always. Either way, I didn't move. I just watched. And maybe that was enough. For now.